Who will win the NBA Finals? Will the New York Liberty dominate this season? Will the Florida Panthers win back-to-back Stanley Cups? How were the Women's College World Series? Let's talk about it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of Ball Talk with Chanel. I'm your host, Chanel, and this podcast will keep you updated on the latest news that's going on in sports, whether it is the NFL and MLB or international leagues such as the English Premier League or La Liga. This podcast will keep you updated up through the Friday of the week before, every Monday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, each episode is going to be divided into different sections depending on what sport will be talked about for the episode. So, this episode will be divided into 4 sections. The first section, we will be talking about the NBA. We are in the middle of the NBA Finals, so we will be talking about everything going on in the postseason and so much more of the latest news. In the next section, we're going to be talking about the WNBA. Now, the season did start a couple weeks ago, and already so much has happened. So, we're going to go over season standings, any latest news about injuries, and so much more. Next, we're going to be talking about the NHL. We are in the middle of the Stanley Cup Finals, and so far it's been nothing but entertaining. We're going to give a recap of the conference finals, as well as recapping what's been happening in the finals so far. And then finally, in the last section, we're going to be talking about women's college softball. Now, last week just ended the regular season with the Women's College World Series. So, we're going to be recapping about what happened in the postseason, what happened in the championship finals, and so much more. So, with all that being said, let's get on with the episode. So, first section, the NBA. Now, like I mentioned before, we are in the middle of the NBA Finals. But before I recap what's been happening in the finals so far, let's recap what happened during the conference finals. So let's start first with the Western Conference. Now, the Oklahoma City Thunder were facing the Minnesota Timberwolves, and they started out the series with a 2-0 lead. But then Minnesota came fighting back, blowing them out 143-101. Timberwolves star Anthony Edwards had a monstrous game in Game 3, putting up 30 points, 9 rebounds, and 6 assists. However, in Game 4, the Thunder responded back with a 128-126 lead. And now this game was led by none other than Mr. MVP himself, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who dropped 40 points with 9 rebounds and 10 assists, and ultimately gave the Thunder a 3-1 lead. And then we get to Game 5, where the Thunder ultimately ended the series, solidified their placement in the NBA Finals with a 124-94 win. Shai came up big for this game as well, dropping 34 points with 9 rebounds and 7 assists, and ultimately, of course, won Western Conference Finals MVP. So now that's the Western Conference. Now let's move on to the Eastern Conference Finals. The Indiana Pacers were facing the New York Knicks and started the series leading 2-0. However, in Game 3, the Knicks came fighting back, winning 106-100, and who came up big for the team? Center Karl Anthony Towns. He dropped 24 points with 15 rebounds. But then in Game 4, the Pacers responded with a 130-121 win, ultimately giving them the 3-1 lead in the series. And who came up big for the Pacers? None other than Tyrese Halliburton, who had a massive triple-double in Game 4, dropping 32 points with 12 rebounds and 15 assists. However, the Knicks decided that Game 5 was not going to end the series. They won Game 5, winning 111-94, and this, of course, was led by guard Jalen Brunson, who dropped 32 points with 5 rebounds and 5 assists. But then Game 6 was when the Pacers officially ended the series and solidified their place in the finals, winning 125-108. And who came up big for the Pacers? None other than Eastern Conference Finals MVP Pascal Siakam, who dropped 31 points with 5 rebounds and 3 assists. So, Now we have the Oklahoma City Thunder facing the Indiana Pacers in the NBA Finals. So let's recap what has happened so far. So far, the Indiana Pacers are leading the series 1-0 after they won Game 1 111 to 110. Now, what's crazy about this win was the fact that the Pacers were down by as much as 15 points. They went on a 15-4 run to ultimately be only down by 1 point with about a minute left in the game. And guess who hit the game-winning shot? That's right, none other than Tyrese Halliburton, who shot a long jump shot with less than 3 seconds left. Now, Halliburton did end the game with 14 points, 10 rebounds, and 6 assists. But let's not forget about the other players who have also came up big for this game. Pascal Siakam had a good game, ending the game with 19 points, 10 rebounds, and 3 assists. And Obi Toppin also had a good night, ending the game with 17 points, 5 rebounds, and 2 assists. Now, ultimately, we know that, of course, the Pacers won, like I just mentioned before. But let's also talk about Shea, because Shea also had a good game despite the OKC loss. He dropped 38 points with 5 rebounds and 3 assists. So it's not like you could have asked any more from Mr. MVP himself. So now, ultimately, the question that is on everyone's mind. Who will win the NBA Finals this year? So let's just give a quick note, okay? This is the 5th time that the Oklahoma City Thunder has made it to the finals. And of those 5 times, they only have 1 championship. Now, for the Pacers, they have only made it to the finals twice. This is their 2nd time in franchise history that they have made it to the NBA Finals, and they have no championship. So, the question is, will the Thunder receive their 2nd championship, or will the Pacers receive their very first franchise championship? Now, I know everyone's immediate inclination is to say, yes, the Thunder is going to win. That's all I've been seeing on social media. Okay, now the Thunder has been a great team. They have really shown themselves to be one of the best teams in the NBA, right? They were number 1 in the West, and they were number 1 for a reason. But I really do believe that people underestimate how good of a team the Pacers are. So, just to show you as an example, let's look at stats and compare the stats between the Thunder and the Pacers for the postseason. The Thunder in the postseason is shooting 46% from the field, and the Pacers are shooting 50% from the field. The Thunder is shooting 34% from 3, and the Pacers are shooting 41% from 3. Both the Thunder and the Pacers average 6 blocks per game. And I can go on and on with so many different stats, but I'm not going to. But these stats show that the Pacers are just as good of a team, if not better, than the Oklahoma City Thunder, just looking purely from stats. Now, what I will say, though, is who will win the NBA Finals this year really depends on how the key players show up in each of the games. So, for the Thunder, that key player is none other than Shea. Now, he was averaging 32 points per game in the regular season, but we saw in the Western Conference Finals what happens when Shea does not have a good scoring night. Case in point, in that Game 3 blowout against the Minnesota Timberwolves that I mentioned earlier, Shea only had 14 points. Just to give a little bit of context. So, if the Thunder wants to win the NBA Finals this year, they're going to have to make sure that Shea is really showing up scoring-wise, making sure he gets the switches, making sure that he gets the open look shots. Because you really need him to show up, especially offensively, against especially this Indiana Pacers team. Now, let's look at the Pacers. Their key player, of course, is Tyrese Halliburton. Now, he is one of the most efficient guards in the game. He only averaged 2 turnovers per game in the regular season, and on top of that has averaged 19 points per game. And we see how much of a difference it makes when Tyrese has such a good night, especially scoring-wise. Case in point, the massive triple-double in the Eastern Conference Finals that I mentioned earlier. So, just like Shea, if the Pacers want to win their very first franchise championship, they're going to have to make sure that their star player is showing up offensively, making sure that he's able to get the open looks, make sure he gets the good shot selection. So, just as a prediction of who I think are going to win the NBA Finals, I do think it's going to be the Oklahoma City Thunder. Now, with that being said, I don't agree with what people have been saying on social media, saying that this is going to be a sweep or that the Thunder is going to win in 5. I think this is going to be a 7-game series. And on top of that, I think each game is going to be like game 1. It's going to be a 1 or 2 point game, or ultimately it's going to go into overtime. I don't think that the Pacers are at any point going to lose by more than 10 points. Now, the reason why I do think that the Thunder is going to win is because of the fact that as much as the Pacers are going to be fighting in each of the games, I think by game 7, you're going to see the key players start becoming gassed. You're going to start to see them be tired. And OKC has a deep bench where I think because of the consistent rotations, the Pacers are ultimately not going to be able to outpace them by game 7. Everyone's just going to be extremely exhausted. So that's just my prediction as to what I think is going to happen with the NBA Finals. Now, let's just talk about news that's been happening outside of the finals. And of course, I have to bring up the Zion Williamson lawsuit. So, just for context, Zion Williamson is being sued by an unidentified woman. She has listed herself as Jane Doe, and she has reported continuous patterns of Zion abusing her throughout their relationship from 2018 to 2023. Specifically in her lawsuit, she has mentioned 2 incidents where Zion has sexually assaulted her. She is seeking damages, and according to reports, those damages could be anywhere from $18 million to $50 million. Now, the NBA nor the New Orleans Pelicans have released a statement regarding Zion's lawsuit. And in fact, the Pelicans, every time they have been asked about Zion's lawsuit, have been deferring to Zion's legal team. And of course, Zion's legal team has been stating that all of these allegations are false. Now, of course, I'm not going to make a statement about the specific details about the lawsuit and everything that's being alleged. But what I will say is that I am shocked that the NBA and the Pelicans have not made some sort of statement about this lawsuit. And the reason why I am shocked is because usually when there is major news or a major lawsuit that has happened among the team players or the coaches or any one of the team personnel, the NBA or the team usually comes out with some sort of statement, at least acknowledging that they know about the incident. So, let me give you just a very recent example. So, former Thunder guard and current Chicago Bulls guard Josh Giddey was facing allegations of having an inappropriate relationship with an underage female. Now, a month later, after these allegations came to the surface, Adam Silver came out with a statement very much just stating that they are aware of the situation, but the NBA investigation is going to take a step back from the police process. So, I would have expected Adam Silver to make some sort of statement that is similar to that for Zion's lawsuit. Now, granted, this lawsuit was just filed, it seems like, because the news just came out last week, maybe 2 weeks ago. But I am still shocked that the NBA, that the Pelicans have not said anything, even if it's something just as general as what Adam Silver said about Josh Giddey's situation. Maybe we will see a statement come out in the next week or 2 as there be more updates about the lawsuit. But for right now, this will forever baffle me. And now, before I end this section about the NBA, I do need to talk about one more thing. And that is, who will be the New York Knicks' new head coach? Now, it was announced a couple of days after the Knicks lost in Game 6 in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Pacers that they were firing Tom Thibodeau, their head coach. Now, this move, to me, by the Knicks, did not make any sense whatsoever. Here's the thing. The Knicks had their best season in 25 years. And look, I get it. You didn't make it to the NBA Finals. But you still made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, and you didn't get swept. You lost in 6 games to a good Pacers team. Now, I'm aware, and of course a lot of people are aware, that Tom Thibodeau is known for being extremely stubborn, about running his players essentially to the ground, playing them 48 minutes every single game, and not really giving them a break. But here's the thing. I would have given Tom 1 or 2 more seasons. I know he's been there now for the past couple seasons, but ultimately, I would have given him 1 or 2 more seasons to really prove himself, to really see if he can take the Knicks to the finals. Like, here's the thing, the fact that the Knicks were able to make it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals just indicates to me, and I think to a lot of people as well, that the Knicks have a good enough team that they can make it to the NBA Finals. And look, too, this was all because largely of that major trade that happened back in October, where the Knicks acquired Karl Anthony Towns in exchange for Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo. So ultimately, I, especially with this new team, would have told Tom, like, hey, you need to stop running your players to the ground. You need to stop being so stubborn, and I will give you 1 more season. That's at least how I would have approached this. Not immediately go and fire him because you didn't make it to the finals this year. But ultimately, decision has been made, and Tom is officially out. So the question is, who exactly is going to replace Thibodeau? Now, some people have called for Mark Jackson. Some people have called for Michael Malone. I don't know if Mark Jackson really wants to coach again. I don't know if he wants to be in that New York pressure. I don't know if he really wants to jump into that after not being a coach for over a decade now. So I don't think Mark Jackson is going to be hired. Now, who I do think is going to be hired as the new head coach is Michael Malone, especially in the past couple of seasons, especially with the Nuggets winning the NBA Finals. I think the Knicks are going to look at him as that opportunity, as that new coach that will be able to take this team to the NBA Finals. But let's see what happens. So, keeping on the conversation about basketball, let's move on to section 2, which is going to be focused on the WNBA. Now, like I mentioned before, the regular season started a few weeks ago. It started on May 17th. And so far, a lot has really happened. So let's just first start with where the teams are pretty much standing so far. So looking at the standings, the New York Liberty are currently the top team in the league, and they have been dominant. They are currently undefeated. And this dominance by the team is all thanks to their star players. So forward Breanna Stewart is having such a great season, averaging 19 points with 5 rebounds and 3 assists. But we can't give all the credit to her because look at Senator Jonquel Jones. She is averaging 17 points, 10 rebounds, and 4 assists. And then we have guard Sabrina Ionescu, who's also having a good start to the season. And she is averaging 14 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists. So just looking at the stats from those 3 star players, you can just see how dominant the team has been. And I didn't even bring up players such as Natasha Cloud or Kennedy Burke. Now, with that being said, there is another team that threatens the Liberty's position. In fact, they are the other team that is also undefeated this season, and that is the Minnesota Lynx. Now, the Lynx, as far as rankings, are right below the New York Liberty, and the only reason why they're below is because they average less points per game than the Liberty. And so, the reason why they are also top in the league is because, again, of how their star players have been showing up in each of the games. Now, let's look at forward Nafisa Collier, who is having a great season. She is averaging 27 points, 8 rebounds, and 3 assists. And then we have guard Courtney Williams, who is averaging 15 points, 5 rebounds, and 7 assists. And then we also have guard Kayla McBride, who's also having a good season, averaging 15 points and 3 assists. So here's the fundamental question. Will the Minnesota Lynx be able to top the New York Liberty in the rankings? And if so, can they maintain that position for a while? Now, I don't think they're going to be able to top the New York Liberty in the rankings. And if they do, I don't think they're going to be able to maintain it for a while. And in fact, I actually think that the New York Liberty are going to be the top team for a while. And the reason why I think this is because the Liberty is a very, very good and strong team. Now, what I'm about to say just assumes that there are no major injuries that happens onto the team. and also that all the players are continuing to perform the way they are performing right now. So, in looking at the difference in strengths between the different teams, let's just look purely at the regular season stats so far. The Liberty are shooting 50% from the field, and the Lynx are shooting 47% from the field. The Liberty is shooting 38% from three, and the Lynx are shooting 35% from three. The Liberty averages 7 blocks per game, and the Lynx average 4 blocks per game. The Liberty also averages 9 steals per game, and the Lynx average 8 steals per game. And I can name so many other stats, but ultimately the point I'm trying to show is how much stronger of a team the Liberty is compared to the Minnesota Lynx. And just looking outside of the stats, let's just look immediately at the players. Okay, the Liberty has Ionescu, who can change the course of a game. Breanna Stewart, who can change the course of a game. Jonquel Jones, who can change the course of a game. Natasha Cloud, who can change the course of a game. They have so many talented players. The Liberty are, in effect, a super team. They are the WNBA's super team. And I think as the super team, they're just going to be naturally at the top. Now, me stating all of that, I do not think that the Minnesota Lynx are a bad team. I actually think they're going to be really competitive in the playoffs. And we saw how competitive they were last season. Now, I think the problem that Minnesota has is that they really don't have anyone that can change the game if Collier is out. So, let's just give an example, okay? If, let's say, knock on wood, Breanna Stewart comes down with a minor injury, okay? You still have Sabrina Ionescu, Jonquel Jones, Natasha Cloud, all these other players that can still take over for Breanna Stewart. Now, they may not be as efficient as far as scoring. They may not give you probably the same amount of defense, but they can still be that temporary holding the team together until Breanna gets back. Now, for the Minnesota Lynx, however, who is stepping in if Napheesa Collier is out? Will it be Courtney Williams? Will it be Kayla McBride? I mean, in fact, we actually did see that Collier actually went out with an injury. Now, the Lynx still ended up winning the game, and it was because Courtney Williams, Satu Sabali, they came in, they stepped up, they had such a good game. But I don't think that this is going to be something that is truly sustainable. Now, the Lynx do run their offense around Napheesa Collier, which of course makes sense because she is the best player on the team. But I think that if the Lynx continues to do this, then other teams are going to catch on. They're going to give Napheesa Collier the Caitlin Clark treatment in that they're going to start doubling and triple teaming her, and she's just not going to be able to have that efficient of a game, just scoring-wise. And I do not think that the other role players are going to be able to fill in that gap. So I think that is where the Lynx are going to have their problems. Now, speaking of Caitlin Clark, let's talk about the Indiana Fever. Now, right now, they are currently struggling. They are 8th right now in the ranking. The fact that the Indiana Fever is struggling right now does not in any way, shape, or form dictate or even tell you how Caitlin Clark is doing this season. She is actually having such a great start to the season. She is averaging 19 points, 6 rebounds, and 9 assists. She is shooting 40% from the field, 31% from 3, and 75% from the free throw line. And just from this start to the season, you can see how much Clark has improved from last season. She is taking more mid-range shots, which is something that we as fans did not see while she was playing at Iowa for 4 years and even last season with the Fever. She's doing better with her shot selection. She's not rushing her passes. Just overall, her game is really, really improving. So the question is, if Caitlin Clark is having such a good season, why are the Indiana Fever struggling as much as they are? And I do not think that this has anything to do with talent, okay? I think the Indiana Fever, especially with their acquisitions of Sophie Cunningham and DeWanna Bonner, that it's an issue of talent and they do not have the skills to be able to compete. Because I think they do. I think the problem is that the Indiana Fever does not have the support from the role players. Now, granted, who is my exception to this? Aaliyah Boston. Now, she is leading the team in blocks and rebounds, And on top of that, is averaging 17 points per game. But outside of her, Caitlin Clark is ultimately doing everything else for the team. And it seems like the Fever have, just like what I mentioned earlier about the Minnesota Lynx, they are placing all of their offense, they are running all of their plays around Caitlin Clark. And ultimately, teams are going to be doubling her. They're going to be triple teaming her. We saw that last season. And we saw those games where Caitlin Clark was being doubled and even triple teamed. And we saw how much she was struggling just scoring wise. Now, what also doesn't help with the Fever is the fact that they have so many injuries right now. You have Sophie Cunningham, who left the game with an injury. You have Sid Colson, who left the game with an injury when they played the Washington Mystics. So ultimately, not only is it the lack of support from the Fever, but then you also have injuries. And it also doesn't help that Caitlin Clark is also out with a left quad strain. So because of the fact that the Fever are not looking good just injury-wise, and on top of that, Stephanie White just seems to continue to run her plays all through Caitlin Clark, I ultimately think unless something changes, especially with the role players and how they want to run their plays, I think the Fever are going to continue to struggle. Now, I also want to take this time to talk about the Chicago Sky. Now, the Sky are also struggling. They are 11th in the rankings. Now, of course, they have, drafted players such as Haley Van Lith. Of course, they have players such as Angel Reese, Camila Cardozo, and the likes. But it seems like still nothing is just working for them. And so I want to take this time to actually, speaking of Angel Reese, just talk about her because there seems to be a lot of misinformation that is being spread on social media. So, for context, she is averaging 10 points, 14 rebounds, and 2 assists. She is shooting 31% from the field, 33% from 3, and 65% from the free throw line. Now, she did hit a major milestone this season. She is the fastest player to reach 500 points and 500 rebounds. And she ended up doing this in 38 games. So she beat Tina Charles's record of being able to complete that stat in 44 games. Now, a lot of people want to talk about first, she cannot shoot to save her life. Okay, so then how is she able to get to 500 points if she cannot shoot? She actually only has the rebounds because she only rebounds her own shots. Okay, so first of all, she averages more defensive rebounds than she does offensive rebounds. Okay, that is just a stat. Last season, just as an example, she had a total of 446 rebounds. And of those 446 rebounds, 274 of those were defensive rebounds, which is more than 50%. So, AKA, most of her rebounds are defensive rebounds. Now, as far as the offensive rebounds, okay? Now, I get it, that seems like, okay, she does average a lot of offensive rebounds per game. But what is she supposed to do if she misses a shot? It's not like every single WNBA player, except for her, is shooting 100% from the field, okay? That's just not how basketball works, okay? You're going to miss some shots. That's just the nature of the game. So if she misses her shot, what do you want her to do? Just stand there? Just run away? No. What you're supposed to do, which is basketball 101, is if you miss the shot, go get your rebound. That is ultimately one of the things you are taught when you play basketball. So the fact that people are talking about Angel Reese getting offensive rebounds, I'm not understanding what the issue is. Now, as far as her scoring, no one here is saying that she is the best offensive player in the world. No one here is saying that. No one would even believe that. But I think to put out this story that she cannot make any shots, that she's just kind of there running around, putting up a Kyle Kuzma kind of number or a Tony Snell kind of number, where it's just a quintuple, quadruple, just straight zeros, is nuts. She does not average 10 points a game for nothing. So we need to stop with the misinformation, and we need to actually watch the games and not keep watching clips that people make of Angel Reese missing her shots. Because fundamentally, you can do that with every player. Like, if you never watched the NBA, I can make a compilation of how many shots LeBron James have missed, how many shots Steph Curry has missed. I can make a compilation of that and show that to someone who's never watched basketball a day in their life, or who has never watched the NBA a day in their lives, right? That doesn't mean that they're bad players, right? But that's just a compilation that you made. So, I think with all that being said, I just want to conclude by saying this. Please stop. Just stop with the misinformation about Angel Reese. I think the hate is completely unnecessary, and you can really see, especially this season, how much it's getting to her mentally. Like, we just need to stop. Seriously. So, with that being said, let's move on to two other players that I want to highlight. So first, of course, I want to highlight A'ja Wilson, right? She is, of course, the best player in the league. She is the face of the WNBA, and she is continuing to have such a great season. Now, the Aces are struggling right now, and they're 7th in the rankings, but that does not take away from how good of a season A'ja is having. She leads her team in all stats. She is averaging 20 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals, and 2 blocks. She is leading her team in everything. It's just straight A'ja Wilson, okay? Now, in my opinion, like I mentioned earlier, I do think she is the best player in the league. I don't want to hear it about people saying that, oh, it's Caitlin Clark. No, I don't think it's Caitlin Clark as of right now. I think right now it's still A'ja Wilson. Not to say that Caitlin Clark cannot be the best player in the league, but I think as of right now it's still A'ja Wilson. Now, could Caitlin Clark ultimately win, MVP? She could. She absolutely could. I just showed her stats earlier. But I think it's really going to be a tight race, just looking at stats right now, between her and A'ja Wilson of who's going to get MVP. So let's just see how the rest of the season goes. Now, outside of A'ja Wilson, who I want to talk about is Paige Bueckers. Because right now, even though she is out with a concussion, she is showing herself to be one of the best rookies in the league. She is averaging 15 points, 5 rebounds, 7 assists, and 2 steals. She is shooting 44% from the field, 33% from 3, and 81% from the free throw line. Now, the Wings are also struggling this season. They are currently 12th in the rankings. And right now, like I mentioned before, Paige is out with a concussion injury. So all of the ball pressure, all of the scoring and everything else is now going to be placed on Arike Ogunbowale. I have no idea what the issue is right now. I have no idea why they are struggling because they actually have a halfway decent team. They should not be 12th in the league right now. But let's just see what happens. Maybe momentum changes in the middle of the season. I don't know. But right now, it's just not looking like a good start for the team. So, before we continue, please make sure to follow all of my social media pages, my TikTok, my Instagram, my Facebook, my Snapchat, my X account, my Threads account, are all Ball Talk with Chanel. If you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Music, please make sure that you hit a thumbs up and make sure you follow this page so you do not miss a single episode. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button, make sure you turn on notifications, and make sure you hit that like button down below so you do not miss a single episode and I can continue to make episodes just like this. Now, back to the episode. So, let's move on now to section 3, which is going to be all about the NHL. Now, like I mentioned in the beginning of this episode, we are currently in the middle of the Stanley Cup Finals. But before I recap about what has happened in the finals so far, let's just talk about what's happened in the conference finals. So, let's start first with the Eastern Conference Finals. Now, the Florida Panthers were facing the Carolina Hurricanes, and they started out the series 2-0. And in Game 3, Florida really showed their dominance, winning 6-2. Now, of course, who helped the Panthers solidify this win was defender Nico Mikola, who scored 2 goals, center Alexander Barkov, who had 2 goals and 1 assist, and center Jesper Boquist, who had 1 goal and 2 assists. And then in Game 4, the Carolina Hurricanes responded with a 3-0 win. And who helped solidify this win for the Hurricanes? Center Logan Stankoven, who scored 1 goal, goalie Frederick Anderson, who had 20 saves, Now, of course, at this point, Florida was leading the series 3-1, and then we get to Game 5 where the Panthers just ended the series. Now, of course, this win was led by left wing Matthew Catchup, who had 1 goal and 1 assist, center Sebastian Aho, who had 2 goals, and center Carter Verhaeghe, who had 1 goal. Now that's the Eastern Conference. Now let's move on to the Western Conference. Now, of course, the series was tied in the beginning at 1 apiece. And then Game 3 was when the Oilers completely dominated the Dallas Stars, winning 6-1. Now, who helped the Oilers dominate this game? Goalie Stuart Skinner, who had 33 total saves. Left wing Zach Hyman, who had 2 goals and 1 assist. And center Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, who had 3 assists. Now in Game 4, the Oilers also had another big win, winning 4-1. Now, of course, who helped with this win were center Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, who had 2 assists, goalie Stuart Skinner, who had 28 saves, and right wing Corey Perry, who had 1 goal and 1 assist. Now by this point, the Oilers are up 3-1. And then, of course, by Game 5, the Oilers officially ended the series, winning Game 5 6-3. Now, who helped end the series officially? Center Connor McDavid, who had 1 goal and 1 assist, and center Leon Draisaitl, who had 2 assists. Now, of course, even though the Oilers came out with the win, we cannot ignore Dallas Stars' left wing, Jason Robertson, because he scored 2 of the 3 goals for the Stars. But like I mentioned before, the Oilers ended the series, and now we have a rematch of last year's Stanley Cup. We have the Florida Panthers versus the Edmonton Oilers. Now, let's just recap what's been happening with the Stanley Cup Finals so far. So, the Oilers took Game 1 with an overtime thriller, winning 3-2. Now, of course, as a recap, the Oilers scored the first goal of the game. Then it was followed by 2 goals from the Panthers. And then, of course, the Oilers scored the next 2 goals, and it was going back and forth until the end of regulation. Then we get into overtime, where they were going back and forth until Leon Draisaitl scored the goal to officially solidify the win for the Oilers. And then in Game 2, there was a double overtime thriller, which was ultimately won by the Florida Panthers, and they won 5-4. Now, just like Game 1, they were going back and forth, and then, of course, in overtime, no one ended up scoring, and then in double overtime, Panther star Brad Marchand ended up scoring the goal to give Florida that win. So right now, the series is tied at 1 apiece. And now the question is, who exactly is going to win this year? Now, as we all know, last year the Stanley Cup Finals went all the way to 7 games, and the Panthers ended up winning Game 7 2-1. So the question now is, will the Panthers be able to win back-to-back Stanley Cups? And just as a prediction, I do not think so. I do not think that the Panthers are going to win. Now, I do think that the series is also going to go to 7. I do not think that this is going to be a 1 team wins in 5 or anything else like that. I truly, truly believe that this series is going to go to 7. Both teams are extremely strong. Both teams are extremely good. But I think what's going to be with the Oilers is that remembering from last season and remembering that Game 7 loss. I think that in itself is going to give the Oilers that extra oomph that's going to allow them to win Game 7. That's just my prediction. And now we move on to the final section, which is all about college softball. Now, like I mentioned in the beginning of this episode, last week officially ended the season for college softball. Now, we had the Women's College Championship Final Series last week, and so let's just recap everything that has happened. Now, number 2 ranked Oklahoma was absolutely dominating this season. And truthfully, who wouldn't think so? They have won the championship for the past 4 straight years. And so now, of course, they are chasing their 5th straight championship. But that run was completely ended by number 12 Texas Tech. Now, in their meetup, the Red Raiders did score 2 runs in the 2nd inning, and then it was tied up with Oklahoma scoring 2 runs in the 7th inning. And then at the bottom of the 7th, the Raiders brought a girl home, and she scored a run that ultimately solidified the win for them. And that allowed Texas Tech to move on to the championship finals. And then we had number 6 Texas versus number 7 Tennessee. Now, the Longhorns were able to bring in a run in the 4th inning, and then they were able to bring in another run in the 6th inning. Now, Tennessee, throughout this entire time, could not get a run in to save their lives. They just absolutely couldn't. And Texas ended up winning, and they also were heading to the championship finals. So now we had number 12 Texas Tech, the Red Raiders, versus number 6 Texas, the Longhorns. And listen, this series was absolutely exciting. So game 1 was a win for the Longhorns, with them winning 2-1. Now Texas Tech was leading in the 5th inning 1-0. And then Texas officially took the win by bringing in 2 runs in the 6th inning. But then we get to game 2, and Texas Tech gets their revenge with the win. Now Texas Tech was up 2-0 going into the 6th inning, and then Texas went and scored a run at the top of the 6th. And then at the bottom of the 6th inning was when Texas Tech scored 2 more runs. Now going into the top of the 7th, Texas actually scored 2 runs, so made the score 4-3, and they even had a runner on third base. Unfortunately, though, they were not able to capitalize. They were not able to bring her home, and ultimately Texas Tech ended up with the win. And then we get to game 3. The end-all be-all, the who is going to be the national champion. And Texas came out swinging, literally. In the first inning alone, Texas had 5 runs scored. In the first inning alone. Then they had another run in the 3rd inning. And then in the 4th inning, Texas player Mia Scott hit a grand slam for the Longhorns. So the score at that point, 10-0. And throughout this entire time, Texas Tech was just unable to get on base. Never mind score a run. They were unable to get on base in the first place. Now, they were able to get their run, but they got their first run in the 5th inning. And in the 5th inning, they ended up scoring a total of 3 runs. So they had a major hill to climb if they wanted to make this even remotely close. They scored another run at the top of the 7th inning, and unfortunately, that's just where the scoring ended. And so Texas became the national champions, and they were the first SEC team to win the Women's College World Series in a long time. Now, with that, I have no doubt in my mind that Texas Tech is going to make another great run next season. They have signed their star pitcher, Nyjah Kennedy, to another 7-year NIL deal to return to Texas Tech. So not only do they get their star player back, but I am certain that they are going to have just about all of their players back. So I wouldn't be shocked if Texas Tech went and made another run just as far as their revenge and their comeback for next season. But of course, we have to look at teams such as the national champions, Texas. We have to look at Oklahoma. We have to look at Texas A&M, who was number 1 this season. We have so many other teams that, of course, we need to look at. But I, in my mind, do not doubt that Texas Tech is going to make another run next season. This is all for this episode. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to tune in next Monday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time so you can listen to the next episode and you can get the weekly catch-up. That's all for today. Bye.